Filet mignon? He didn't know who was about to serve him humble pie. The clinking silverware, Dominic Davenport ate it up, savoring the sounds of his own wealth. Across the table, Pierce, the bootlicker, nodded like a bobblehead. Another deal was closing. They were unstoppable. A waitress approached, Lena, her feet aching, another nameless face in the sea of Manhattan ambition. But she heard Davenport switch to German, a language he thought was his secret weapon. He sneered about gutting a German company, Nordstern AG. He has no idea. He assumes she's just decor. He's dead wrong. He's about to learn she remembers everything. Compassion is her weapon, and he's about to learn it will not be silenced. Filet mignon? He didn't know who was about to serve him humble pie. The clinking silverware, Dominic Davenport ate it up, savoring the sounds of his own wealth. Across the table, Pierce, the bootlicker, nodded like a bobblehead. Another deal was closing. They were unstoppable. A waitress approached, Lena, her feet aching, another nameless face in the sea of Manhattan ambition. But she heard Davenport switch to German, a language he thought was his secret weapon. He sneered about gutting a German company, Nordstern AG. He has no idea. He assumes she's just decor. He's dead wrong. He's about to learn she remembers everything. Compassion is her weapon, and he's about to learn it will not be silenced. 19 months. 19 months she'd traded her Berlin office for sensible shoes on Aria's plush carpets. Once, Lena's days involved parsing balance sheets, not bussing them. Now she navigated the Michelin-starred maze, a ghost in black, anticipating needs before they were voiced. Each clink of crystal, each whispered deal, echoed the life she'd lost. Aria reeked of power tonight. Wall Street wolves, flush with victory, packed the room. Lena moved among them, a silent server, refilling water glasses, her practiced smile never quite reaching the gray depths of her eyes. Maria, her manager, a tough woman with surprising kindness, had warned her, "Table 7, Davenport, steer clear if you can." Dominic Davenport, his name synonymous with ruthless acquisitions, haunted financial headlines, a shark with silver streaks, perpetually calculating, perpetually hungry. When Lena approached, she felt his energy, a palpable force of unshakable self-regard. He sat with two others. Pierce, young and obsequious, practically vibrated with the need to please, and Mr. Kobayashi, a Japanese businessman, radiating quiet observation, the prize they were courting. Chateau Margaux. 09, Davenport barked, not bothering to make eye contact. He didn't request. He commanded, testing her knowledge with the casual arrogance of a man accustomed to immediate obedience. "Excellent choice, sir," Lena replied, her voice even. No fawning, no stories about the vineyard, just efficiency. Be invisible, she reminded herself. Be forgettable. She performed the wine ritual, presenting the bottle with practiced grace, but Davenport was already deep in discussion with Kobayashi, dissecting market volatility. Pierce, however, tracked her every move, a pathetic sentinel guarding against spills. "The key to our strategy," Kobayashi, Davenport was saying, his English precise yet laced with contempt for those who hadn't mastered it, "is identifying undervalued assets burdened by inefficient management. We don't simply invest, we cleanse. We strip away the sentimentality, exposing the profitable core." Kobayashi nodded slowly, his expression inscrutable. "A philosophy of disruption, Davenport-san." "Precisely. Disruption is progress." He swirled the wine, inhaled, and gave a curt nod, a judgment passed not on Lena, but on the vintage itself. As Lena poured the last drops, Pierce coughed. "San Pellegrino, for me." She nodded, turning towards the service station. Yet a nagging familiarity stirred. It wasn't just Davenport's public persona. It was the rhythm of his arrogance, a precise cadence she'd heard before. It reminded her of boardrooms in Berlin, of men carving up companies with clinical precision. She dismissed it. Just a ghost. Every powerful man sounded the same, didn't they? Her past was locked away. All she needed was to survive this shift, collect her meager tips, and vanish back into the anonymity of Queens. The meal flowed, a macabre ballet of consumption. Lena cleared tuna tataki, replaced it with the mains, filet mignon for Davenport, halibut for Pierce, miso glazed cod for Kobayashi. Davenport held court, his voice dominating. He wanted to impress Kobayashi. That much was clear. This deal, a joint venture targeting a German manufacturing firm, was significant. Suddenly, he switched to German, a private channel in the English-speaking storm. He likely assumed a waitress wouldn't comprehend the cutthroat language of Frankfurt finance. A girl from Ohio, maybe, dreaming of Broadway. He leaned forward, a conspiratorial glint in his eyes. Also, Herr Kobayashi, he began, his tone hardening, the board of Nordstern AG is weak, a collection of old men clinging to the past. Lena froze, polishing cutlery near the service station. The word struck her like a physical blow. High German, with that Hessian accent, the language of her former life. Her hands clenched around a silver fork. Don't react. You're invisible. Pierce, ever the sycophant, chimed in, his German less polished, more eager. Absolutely, we have internal projections showing a 40% reduction in operating costs. Project Chimera will be a masterpiece. Nordstern AG, Project Chimera. The names echoed in the ruined chambers of Lena's memory. Nordstern AG, the family-owned engineering firm she'd fought to protect. 3 years ago in Berlin, she had crafted their defense against a hostile takeover, a plan thwarted by leaked and altered data that destroyed her reputation. The aggressor? A shell corporation, its true backers hidden. And the code name? Project Chimera. Her heart hammered. It couldn't be a coincidence. The world of high finance was a small, incestuous village. Cold dread mixed with white-hot rage. These weren't just arrogant patrons. They were vultures picking at a carcass she'd tried to save. They were connected to the moment her life shattered. She had to stay calm, needed to hear more. She moved towards their table, feigning a water refill, keeping her eyes downcast, her face a mask. Davenport, now emboldened, gestured dismissively toward the staff. One must loiter, he sneered, a smirk playing on his lips. You just ignore these people. They're part of the decor. He looked directly at Lena, his eyes sliding right through her. Lowering his voice, he continued. Look at her. Probably a failed artist. A pretty, empty face. Good enough to serve, but utterly devoid of thought. Pierce chuckled nervously. They do what they're told. That's all that matters. The insult, so casually dehumanizing, stole her breath. Not the worst thing she'd heard, but layered on the revelation about Nordstern AG, it was a match to gasoline. The ache in her feet vanished, replaced by adrenaline. The ghost of Berlin wasn't a memory anymore. It was sitting at table 7, eating filet mignon and mocking her in her native tongue. Mr. Kobayashi watched, his gaze curious, perhaps even uncomfortable. He was a witness. Davenport, oblivious, continued. The point is, we must act fast. As soon as we have control, we'll outsource R&D. Too expensive, too sentimental. Their most valuable patents are all we want. The exact strategy the Shell Corporation had planned. The exact strategy she had warned Nordstern against. Davenport wasn't just connected, he was the architect. He'd hidden behind corporate secrecy, and now, thousands of miles away, he was laying bare his sins, assuming her ignorance. Lena poured the water, her hands steady. The humiliation, the years of struggle, the injustice, coalesced into clarity. She wasn't just a waitress, she was Lena Vogel, and she remembered everything. The rest of the main course was a blur. Rage simmered beneath an icy calm. An opportunity had fallen into her lap. Dangerous, terrifying, irresistible. Not revenge, justice. She served dessert, chocolate lava cake for Davenport and Pierce, yuzu sorbet for Kobayashi. The German conversation droned on, financial jargon and self-congratulatory laughter. Davenport boasted about a tech firm in Munich, trimming the fat, laying off hundreds before the holidays. Finally, the meal ended. Plates cleared, wine gone. Davenport leaned back, patting his stomach like a Roman emperor. He snapped his fingers at Lena. The check. Then as she turned, he delivered the final insult in German. for his companion's benefit. Hurry up, girl. We have more important things to do than wait for you to drag your little shoes over here. Lena stopped. The restaurant faded. The clatter, the murmur, the sirens dissolved into a low hum. Only table 7 and his words remained. Hurry up, girl. She took a slow breath. She could walk away, bring the check, accept his paltry tip, disappear. Safe, smart. But 19 months of biting her tongue, of swallowing pride, of accepting injustice, was over. She turned back, walked to the table not shuffling, but with the confident stride she once used in boardrooms. No bill folder in hand. Her hands were empty, clasped loosely. She looked directly at Dominic Davenport, forcing him to acknowledge her as more than furniture. A flicker of annoyance crossed his face. Lena smiled, but not the waitress smile. This one was sharp, precise, devoid of warmth. And then she spoke, her German flawless, formal, academic. Entschuldigen Sie, mein Herr, Ihre Rechnung kommt sofort, aber ich muss Sie auf etwas hinweisen. The effect was instantaneous, seismic. Lena's opening remarks were polite, but the tone was firm. Each carefully enunciated word delivered with the skill of a professional. Dominic Davenport's smug expression didn't just fall, it shattered. His jaw went slack, his eyes widened in disbelief. He looked as if a statue had just started speaking. Pierce froze with chocolate on his fork, his face paling. He looked from Lena to Dominic, pure panic in his eyes. Only Mr. Kobayashi seemed unfazed. He placed his napkin on the table, leaned forward, and watched Lena with intense interest. Lena continued, her gaze locked on Davenport. Ihren Umgangston betreffend. Es ist etwas respektlos, eine Dame so anzusprechen, selbst wenn sie nur eine Kellnerin ist. Junge Frau oder Fräulein wäre vielleicht angemessener als Mädchen. Es mangelt an Respekt. She let the correction hang, a precise incision. It was more than a comment on his language. It was a challenge to his perceived superiority. Dominic finally found his voice, sputtering, What do you think you're doing? Lena's smile tightened. She echoed Pierce's earlier remark. I'm just doing what I'm told. That's all that matters, right? But sometimes one overhears things. For example, that the board of Nordstern AG is weak, or that Project Chimera aims to dismantle their research and development department to get at their patents. Every word was a hammer blow. Pierce dropped his fork. It clattered on his plate. Dominic's face, already pale, was now ashen. He was looking at her, truly seeing her, and a dawning recognition mixed with fear bloomed in his eyes. He didn't know who she was yet, but he knew she was not a waitress. She was a threat. The silence around table 7 was thick. Davenport stared at Lena, his mind racing, trying to place her, to categorize her, to understand the monumental miscalculation he'd made. He was a man who controlled every variable. Now a random variable had recited his most secret plan. He tried to regain control, falling back on blustering authority. Das ist absurd, he snarled. You have no idea what you're talking about. You've been eavesdropping. That's grounds for immediate dismissal. Lena didn't flinch. The fear she'd lived with for 2 years burned away. Davenport, she replied, her voice dangerously calm. Davenport Capital. Oh, I know exactly what I'm talking about. Project Chimera isn't new. It's repackaged from 3 years ago. Back then, it was pushed by a shell company called Ether Holdings to disguise the true investors. Investors like, for example, Davenport Capital. At the mention of Ether Holdings, Pierce choked. It was a ghost entity, buried deep in their corporate history, used for their most aggressive operations. For a waitress to know that name was impossible. Dominic's eyes narrowed, the bluster gone, replaced by reptilian focus. Who are you? He demanded, switching back to English as if the language could shield him. This was the moment. Lena stood taller, letting the mask of the waitress fall away. In its place was the sharp, brilliant analyst she'd been. My name, she said slowly, deliberately, her German crisp for all 3 men to understand, is Lena Vogel. She let her name hang in the air. To Pierce and Kobayashi, it meant nothing. But she wasn't looking at them. She was looking at Dominic Davenport. She saw the confusion, the frantic search through his mental archives. And then she saw the moment he found it. The puzzle pieces clicked. His face turned the color of bleached bone. He remembered. Lena Vogel, lead analyst at Deutsche Strategic Bank in Berlin, she continued, pressing her advantage. I wrote the defensive strategy for Nordstern AG against your first attack. The strategy that would have worked if my data hadn't been stolen and manipulated to discredit me and destroy my career. You didn't just get me fired, you erased me. You thought I disappeared. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. You hid behind lawyers and shell companies, but I always suspected your work. I just never had the proof until tonight. You just served it to me on a silver platter, along with your insults. Dominic Davenport, titan of industry, king of Aria, was speechless. He looked like he'd seen a ghost, the ghost of the life he had ruined. He had mocked a waitress and confessed his sins to the one person on earth who understood their full significance. Pierce looked ill, implicated, just a passenger on a sinking ship. Then a new voice. Mr. Kobayashi, who had been watching with quiet intensity, folded his hands. He looked at Lena, speaking directly to her, his English formal. Miss Vogel, your name is familiar to me as well. My company, Kobayashi Heavy Industries, was approached by Ether Holdings 2 years ago with a similar disruptive proposal. We declined. We found their methods dishonorable. He turned to Dominic, his gaze cool. Davenport San, I believe our dinner is concluded, and so is our potential partnership. We will not be moving forward with Project Chimera or any other venture with your firm. With that, he stood, bowed respectfully to Lena, not Dominic, and walked away, leaving silence and the wreckage of Davenport's evening, his deal, and possibly his career. Kobayashi's departure was like a gavel striking, ending the proceedings. The spell was broken. Dominic Davenport, frozen in horror, finally lurched into motion, a thunderous mask of fury. You! He hissed at Lena, his voice trembling with rage. You're finished. I'll have you blacklisted from every restaurant, every coffee shop in this city. You'll be scrubbing floors for the rest of your pathetic life. Do you hear me? His voice was rising, attracting the attention of nearby tables. Patrons were starting to turn and stare, sensing the drama unfolding. Maria, the manager, who had been watching from a distance with a worried frown, began to stride purposefully toward them. Lena stood her ground. The threats that would have terrified her yesterday now seemed hollow. You already did your worst to me, Lena, his voice trembling with rage. You're finished. I'll have you blacklisted from every restaurant, every coffee shop in this city. You'll be scrubbing floors for the rest of your pathetic life. Do you hear me? His voice was rising, attracting the attention of nearby tables. Patrons were starting to turn and stare, sensing the drama unfolding. Maria, the manager, who had been watching from a distance with a worried frown, began to stride purposefully toward them. Lena stood her ground. The threats that would have terrified her yesterday now seemed hollow. You already did your worst to me, Davenport, she said, her voice steady. You took my career, my reputation, my home. You think threatening my waitressing job scares me now? You just confessed to corporate espionage and market manipulation in front of a witness. I think you have bigger problems. Just then, Maria arrived at the table. Is there a problem here, Mr. Davenport? She asked, her tone firm but professional. This employee of yours? Dominic sputtered, pointing a shaking finger at Lena. She's insane. She's been harassing us, making wild accusations. I want her fired now. Maria looked from Dominic's apoplectic face to Lena's unnervingly calm one. She had worked in this business for 30 years. She knew the difference between a hysterical employee and a cornered millionaire. Lena, she said gently, why don't you go take your break? I'll handle this. She's not taking a break. She's fired, Dominic roared. Actually, Lena said, unpinning the small magnetic name tag from her uniform. She placed it gently on the table next to the half-eaten lava cake. I quit. She looked at Maria with a small apologetic smile. I'm sorry, Maria, for the scene. Maria just shook her head slightly, a glimmer of understanding and perhaps even pride in her eyes. Go on, honey. It's all right. As Lena turned to walk away, a hand gently touched her arm. She turned. It was Mr. Kobayashi. He had waited for her near the restaurant's exit. In his hand, he held out a sleek black business card. "Ms. Vogt," he said, his voice low, "what Mr. Davenport did to you was an injustice. What he planned to do to Nords is a disease in our industry. My flight back to Tokyo is not until Friday. I would be very interested to hear your full story. Perhaps we have mutual interests." Lena looked down at the card. Kenji Kobayashi, CEO, Kobayashi Heavy Industries. It felt impossibly heavy in her hand, a lifeline thrown from the most unexpected of quarters. "Thank you, Mr. Kobayashi," she said, her voice thick with emotion. I will call you." He gave another short, respectful bow and was gone. Lena walked through the restaurant's kitchen, past the stunned faces of her now former colleagues. She didn't stop at her locker. She walked straight out the back service door and into the cool night air of the alleyway. She leaned against the rough brick wall, the adrenaline finally beginning to subside, leaving her trembling. She had done it. She had stood up to the man who ruined her and had in one spectacular fashion blown up her quiet, miserable life. She was unemployed. She had no plan. But for the first time in a very long time, she felt free. The ghost of Berlin was no longer haunting her. She had given it a voice. Back inside, Arya Dominic Davenport was left to stew in the ruins. His deal was dead. His reputation in front of a major international player was shattered. And a ghost from his past now had a name, a face, and a powerful new potential ally. As he threw his credit card on the table to pay the exorbitant bill, his mind was not on the money. It was on one thing, silencing Lenovo for good this time. The first domino had fallen, and it had landed squarely on him. The war was just beginning. The 24 hours after Lena walked out of Arya were a surreal blend of terror and exhilaration. The initial rush of righteous victory gave way to the stark reality of her situation. She was jobless with dwindling savings and a powerful enemy who now knew exactly where to find her. Every time her phone buzzed, her heart leapt into her throat, expecting a threatening message or a call from a lawyer representing Davenport Capital. She spent the first night sleepless in her small Queens apartment, the business card of Kenji Kobayashi sitting on her nightstand like a talisman. Could she trust him? His gesture seemed genuine, but in her world, altruism was a rare and often deceptive commodity. He was a corporate titan, just like Davenport. Sharks rarely defended the fish. They just competed over who got to eat them. By morning, resolve had hardened her fear. She had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. She took a deep breath and dialed the number on the card. A crisp, professional voice answered immediately. When she gave her name, she was put through to Mr. Kobayashi without a moment's hesitation. "Ms. Vogt." His voice was as calm and measured as it had been in the restaurant. "I am glad you called. I have taken the liberty of securing a conference room at my hotel. Can you meet me in 1 hour?" An hour later, Lena found herself not in a sterile conference room, but in a sprawling penthouse suite at the Mandarin Oriental overlooking Central Park. Mr. Kobayashi was there along with a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s, whom he introduced as Akari Tanaka, the head of his legal department. There were no pretenses. Lena spent the next 2 hours recounting her entire story, starting from her promising career in Berlin, her work on the Nord's defense, the sudden data leak, the doctored reports that pointed directly at her, and the swift, brutal way her firm and the industry had cast her out. She explained how she had fled to New York, taking on a menial job to stay under the radar, ashamed and defeated. Mr. Kobayashi and Ms. Tanaka listened without interruption, their expressions serious. When she was finished, Ms. Tanaka spoke first. "What you describe, Ms. Vogt," she said, her English perfect, "is a classic smear and acquired tactic. Discredit the defense from within, create chaos, and then swoop in to pick up the pieces at a discount. Ether Red Holdings was the legal instrument, but Davenport was the mind behind it. To prove it, we need more than your testimony. We need the original untampered data." "It's gone," Lena said, the old hopelessness creeping back. "It was on a secure server at the bank. After I was fired, my access was revoked and my files were archived, which means they were probably wiped." "Perhaps," Mr. Kobayashi said, leaning forward, "but men like Davenport are arrogant. Arrogance leads to carelessness. They may believe the evidence is destroyed, but digital ghosts are hard to exorcise completely. This is where we may be of assistance. He explained his interest was not purely altruistic. Davenport Capital's predatory tactics were a cancer in the global market. Kobayashi Heavy Industries believed in building and sustaining, not tearing down and selling for parts. Davenport's attempt to recruit him into Project Chimera was an insult to his business philosophy. Helping Lena was a matter of honor, but it was also a strategic move to eliminate a dishonorable competitor. "We have resources misvoked," Mr. Kobayashi stated plainly. "Technological, legal, and financial. We can fund an investigation. We can hire the best forensic data recovery specialists. But we need your expertise. You know where to look. You know the names, the file structures, the protocols from your time at the bank." Just as this new, unbelievable alliance was being forged, Lena's phone rang. It was an unknown number with a German country code. Her blood ran cold. She hesitated, then answered, putting it on speaker. "Lena Fisto." "Lena Fed, is that you?" The voice was old, crackling, and instantly familiar. It was Professor Alrik Brandt, her former mentor from her university days in Heidelberg, a man who taught corporate ethics and was one of the few people who had believed in her innocence. "Professor Brandt," she whispered, stunned. "My child, I have been trying to reach you for a year," he said, his voice filled with urgency. "I saw an article this morning, a small mention in an online financial bulletin. A partnership between Davenport Capital and Kobayashi Heavy Industries has been abruptly canceled after a dramatic dinner incident in New York. It mentioned Davenport by name. I had a terrible feeling it had something to do with you." "Professor Howe." "It doesn't matter," he interrupted. "Listen to me. After you were disgraced, I never believed it. I started my own quiet inquiries. I have a former student, a good man, who now works in the IT security department at Deutsche Strategic Bank. He always felt your case was handled improperly. We spoke last night. Your files were not wiped, Lena. They were placed in a deep archive, a segregated server used for litigation holds. They couldn't wipe them without creating a suspicious data gap. They are dormant, but they exist." Lena stared at the phone, her mind reeling. The one piece of evidence she thought was lost forever. The digital ghost Mr. Kobayashi had just spoken of was real. "There is more," Professor Brandt continued, his voice low. "The man who replaced you, the one who benefited most from your dismissal, was a senior analyst named Henrik Bauer. Bauer left the bank 6 months after you did. He now holds a very comfortable, very senior position at the European headquarters of Davenport Capital." The final piece clicked into place. It was an inside job. Bauer had likely been Davenport's mole all along. He had stolen and altered her data, framed her, and been rewarded for his treason. Lena looked from her phone to Mr. Kobayashi and Ms. Tanaka. Their expressions were grim, determined. The hunt was no longer just for a ghost. They now had a name, a location, and a target. A transatlantic alliance had just been forged, combining Lena's intimate knowledge, Kobayashi's immense resources, and Brandt's crucial intelligence from the heart of the old empire. The war against Dominic Davenport was about to go global. The next 3 weeks were a masterclass in controlled, relentless pressure. The penthouse suite at the Mandarin Oriental, with its panoramic views of Central Park, was transformed from a symbol of luxury into a high-tech transatlantic war room. Whiteboards covered in timelines and names replaced expensive art on the walls. The quiet hum of servers and encrypted communication lines replaced the gentle classical music of the hotel. This was Lena's new office, and she had never felt more at home. She found herself at the center of a formidable team. There was Akari Tanaka, Kobayashi's head of legal, a woman whose calm demeanor masked a mind like a steel trap. She moved with quiet purpose, her calls to legal teams in New York and Frankfurt surgically precise. Then there was Silito, the forensic tech analyst, a young man who seemed to subsist entirely on coffee and instant noodles, his fingers flying across multiple keyboards in a blur. He spoke rarely, but when he did, it was to announce a breakthrough. Lena, for her part, was the heart of the operation. She was the institutional memory, the one who knew the names, the corporate culture of the bank, the protocols, and most importantly, the psychological makeup of the people who had wronged her. The weariness in her eyes was replaced by a sharp, analytical fire. Their first target was not Dominic Davenport, but the man who had been his instrument, Heinrich Bauer. Men like Bauer are driven by two things: greed and ego. Lena explained to the team, pointing to his photo on the whiteboard. He betrayed his firm for money, but he took my job for status. He'll believe his position at Davenport Capital makes him untouchable. That's his weakness. Ms. Tanaka's investigators in Europe began painting a vivid picture of Bauer's life. He wasn't just living well, he was living recklessly. They tracked his lavish spending through public records and discreet sources: a new Porsche, a weekend apartment in Zurich, an online footprint that showed a taste for high-stakes online poker. He's leaking money, Ms. Tanaka observed during one late-night briefing, pointing to a financial summary. His salary is substantial, but his expenditures are astronomical. He's supplementing his income. Saito found the source. He's making small, frequent trades in tech and pharmaceutical stocks. He announced pulling up a color-coded chart. They're timed perfectly, always a day or two before major announcements by companies Davenport Capital has an interest in. It's classic insider trading. He's gotten sloppy, arrogant. While the investigators built their case against Bauer, Ms. Tanaka launched the legal assault on Deutsche Strategic Bank. The initial response was a wall of corporate resistance. The bank's lawyers were dismissive, citing privacy laws and statute of limitations. Ms. Tanaka was unfazed. In a tense video conference with the bank's general counsel in Frankfurt, she laid out her position with chilling clarity. "Herr Schmidt," she began, her voice deceptively pleasant, "we are not on a fishing expedition. We have credible intelligence indicating that a former employee, Lena F., was the victim of corporate espionage originating from within your institution, leading to significant financial and reputational damage. We also have reason to believe the evidence of this crime is stored on a specific litigation hold server, serial number 7, Alpha Delta. Refusing a legitimate targeted discovery request will force us to file a motion compelling your cooperation. The optics of a major bank actively hiding evidence of a crime to protect a saboteur would be unfortunate, especially when our client Kobayashi Industries is considering its future European banking partners." The veiled threat combining legal force with immense financial pressure worked. Within 48 hours, a massive encrypted data file was securely transferred to Saito servers. The next 72 hours were a tense waiting game. Saito worked around the clock, his corner of the suite littered with empty coffee cups. Lena found she couldn't sleep. She paced the suite, the ghosts of her past swirling around her. What if they found nothing? What if the data had been corrupted beyond recovery? On the third night, just as dawn was breaking over the city, Silito called her over. His face was pale with exhaustion, but his eyes were bright. "I found it," he whispered, pointing to his central monitor. "It's beautiful." On the screen were two documents side by side. The first was titled NV Nordstrat VFLX, her file, her work. The second was HB Nordstrat VF Final Ribbons, created 97 minutes after hers. "I've run a differential analysis," Saito said, typing a command. The screen lit up with highlighted text. In Bauer's version, revenue projections were lowered by 12%. Operating cost estimates were inflated by 18%. Debt-to-equity ratios were subtly skewed. They were small changes individually plausible, but together they painted a picture of Lena's strategy as reckless and doomed to fail. It was the work of a skilled liar. "And now for the magic," Saito said. He brought up another window, the server access log. It showed Lena uploading her file at 4:15 p.m. Berlin time. It then showed an access and download of that same file at 4:30 p.m. from an IP address assigned to Heinrich Bauer's terminal. Finally, it showed the upload of his revised sabotaged version at 5:52 p.m. And then the final damning piece of evidence, a log of an encrypted data packet sent from Bauer's terminal at 6:10 p.m. to an offshore server in the Cayman Islands. A server Ms. Tanaka's team had already definitively linked to Ether Red Holdings' Dominic Davenport's shell corporation. Lena stared at the screen, her breath catching in her chest. It was all there. The entire crime laid bare in lines of code and timestamps. It was the truth, pristine and undeniable. She felt a tear slide down her cheek, not of sadness, but of profound, earth-shattering vindication. The final act was swift. Miss Tanaka and a German lawyer flew to Geneva. They didn't storm Bauer's office. They invited him for a coffee at a discreet five-star hotel. He arrived looking smug and slightly annoyed. He barely had time to order an espresso before Ms. Tanaka slid a tablet across the table. On it was the evidence of his insider trading. We believe this constitutes a significant breach of your employment contract with Davenport Capital, not to mention a violation of several Swiss and EU financial regulations, she said calmly. Bauer palled, sputtering denials. Ms. Tanaka let him finish, then slid a second tablet across the table. This one displayed the server logs from the bank. His smugness evaporated, replaced by raw animal panic. My client Lena has no interest in seeing you in prison, her Bauer. Miss Tanaka said, her voice like ice. She wants the man who gave the orders. You have one chance to give us a full signed confession detailing Dominic Davenport's role in the entire affair. In return, we will provide this evidence of your unrelated financial activities to the authorities, who will likely be far more lenient on a cooperative witness than on a common criminal. Cornered and exposed, Heinrich Bauer broke completely. He confessed to everything. With Bauer's signed confession, the dossier was complete. They didn't go to the authorities first. That path was slow, prone to backroom deals. Mr. Kobayashi wanted a public execution. He personally contacted the editors of 3 of the world's most respected financial newspapers, the Wall Street Journal, the Financial Times, and the Handelsblatt. The entire package was delivered to them simultaneously with an embargo of 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. The next day, Lena was awake, watching the sunrise from the penthouse window when the first alerts hit her phone. The headlines were brutal. Davenport's deceit-leaked files reveal years of corporate espionage. The Nordstrom Davenport Capital framed an analyst to seize a German gem. The fall of a titan. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. Trading on stocks linked to Davenport Capital was halted. The SEC, BaFin, and the Swiss authorities announced coordinated, wide-ranging investigations. Davenport's investors, the powerful men and women he had made rich, turned on him with the ferocity of a shark pack. The emergency board meeting was not a negotiation. It was an amputation. They severed every tie, clawed back every bonus they legally could, and threw him out to face the consequences alone. He was a pariah. Lena watched an interview with a visibly shaken board member on TV. We had no idea, the man lied. Dominic Davenport acted alone. His actions are a betrayal of everything we stand for. A week later, a formal settlement offer arrived from Deutsche Strategic Bank. It was a 9-figure sum, a number so large it seemed unreal. It was hush money, an apology, and a restitution all rolled into one. Looking at it, Lena felt a strange detachment. The money was validation, but it couldn't buy back the lost years, the shame, the struggle. Her future was an open, intimidating expense. She had her name back, her reputation not just restored, but enhanced. Job offers flooded in from investment banks and private equity firms, all eager to hire the woman who had outplayed Dominic Davenport. But the idea of returning to that life of poring over spreadsheets to make the rich richer felt like a betrayal of her own journey. She met Mr. Kobayashi one last time in the now dismantled war room. You have a choice, Miss Vogt. He said, you can return to the game, a more powerful player than before, or you can help change the rules. He laid out his vision, the Prometheus Institute, a nonprofit foundation dedicated to corporate ethics and accountability. It would be funded by a coalition of companies led by Kobayashi Industries, who believed that long-term value came from integrity, not predation. It would investigate corporate malfeasance, provide legal aid to whistleblowers, and advocate for stronger regulations. I need someone to lead its European operations, Mr. Kobayashi said. Someone with the skills of an analyst, the heart of a survivor, and the courage of a fighter. Someone who understands exactly what we are up against. Lena looked out the window at the vast city below. She had come here to disappear. She had been a ghost, a whisper. Now she was being offered a sword. She would not be analyzing companies to acquire them. She would be analyzing them to hold them accountable. She would be the guardian she never had. A slow smile spread across her face. the first genuine, joyful smile in years. "Mr. Kobayashi," she said, her voice clear and strong. "When do I start?" That's the incredible story of Lena V., a woman who reminds us that strength and intelligence are not defined by a job title or uniform. It's a powerful testament to the fact that you never truly know the battles the person standing next to you has fought or the hidden power they hold within. Lena's story is about more than just revenge. It's about resilience, the reclamation of one's identity, and the surprising alliances that can form in the fight for justice. It shows that even in a world that seems to be dominated by the loud and the arrogant, a quiet, steady voice speaking the truth can bring down an empire. If you were inspired by Lena's courage and her fight for what is right, please show your support by hitting that like button. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder of their own inner strength. And for more true life stories of incredible twists of fate and triumphant underdogs, make sure to subscribe to our channel and ring that notification bell. Thank you for listening.